And I'd just like to say a couple of things before we start today. I think today is not about money. It's not about rattling the can. It's not about finance. It's about generosity in all its forms. So having that spirit of generosity, of wanting to support and help others, of being good stewards, of being inspired and inspiring ourselves, of being the church together in Suffolk. And so today our hope is an opportunity to consider different ways of how we can be generous together. I genuinely think that our Creator is not someone who experiences a scarcity of resource. So for me today, I'm putting that to one side, and I'm thinking about how I can learn and how I can see God work with the resources that we have. And so please make today an opportunity to, particularly in the workshops and particularly as we hear from our main speakers, please learn from each other, please network, please talk to each other, please ask the speakers any question you want, but also ask each other and engage with each other and have a real dialogue, because we are good at sharing and learning together. So that's all I wanted to say really as a start to the day. It's my pleasure to ask Bishop Graeme, our acting diocesan bishop, to say a few words and lead us in prayer and worship.
In case of emergency, we went across the road to all over beauty. Quick glance around as we might all go now. It's always good to test whether your audience is awake or not. You are awake, which is good. You will have noticed that this is one of the most difficult roads in the whole of Bury St Edmunds. For those of us who live here, when you get to the top of the road that way, you look to the bottom of the road to see if there's another car coming. If it's one of you, you've already started up without noticing that there are two cars coming down, and there's no way to pass. So it's a really good place to practice your reverse driving in one of those awkward situations. And I really enjoy watching people hit this bit of road without knowing how to cope with it at all. So we're here. You can. Thank you. One of my earliest memories as a young child is sitting in our dining room at home when my father was chairing the stewardship committee of Dunstable Priory, and we were going through the electoral register. And the reason for going through the register was to spot what gifts and skills people had. And we were sitting round our dining room table, and somebody would shout a name out, and somebody would say, he's very good at gardening. Or somebody would say, oh, well, for heaven's sake, don't trust him with money. It went on like this around the table. And it was my first experience of that business that stewardship is about, what it says. It's about stewarding who and what you are as an individual, and how that then affects the way in which you act as a Christian. When asked to speak at an ordination, I've often picked up the three things that deacons and priests are asked to be, which is watchmen, messengers, and stewards. And in a funny sort of way, the steward bit is the most difficult bit to get a hold of. I've often said that if the Church of England were to collapse, I would go into service, because what I wanted to be was a butler. I've always wanted to be a butler. The clothes are good to start with, but also the business of what you actually do as a steward, as a butler. You oil the wheels of the household in which you are. You make sure that things function properly, and that people are giving of their best within that particular household. So all of us are called to be stewards, not just stewards out there, but more importantly, stewards in stewards of who and what we are. The great thing about Anglicans is that when you ask them what their gifts are, they all say, oh, I don't have any gifts. They become unbelievably humble straight away. But that's actually not the case, because God, in creating us, actually gives each one of us gifts and skills which he expects us to use in his service. And one of our tasks is to draw out those skills in one another. Yes, we hold up our hands and say, I'm sorry, I have no skills at all. And somebody points at you and says, well, you actually play the piano, don't you? Oh yes, but that's not a skill. Well, come on, there's a skill. So that business of working out what our skills are. There's also the business of letting our skills die within us if we're not careful. We actually have to husband those skills to make sure that they are used and used correctly. And so the calling out of other people's skills is a really important part of who and what we are. The answer to a lot of things is that generosity lies at the very heart of who and what we are as Christian men and women, but also as church. It's God's generosity that we actually celebrate. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. The most generous act possible is that of handing over your Son to redeem the world. And that's what we're celebrating today, the generosity of God. I'm stuck at the moment with Wesley. Wesley keeps pursuing me. There you are, you see. Even from the other side, he's pursuing me. So Wesley keeps pursuing me with his notion of love. Think of all the times in a Wesley hymn that the word love crops up. Love divine, all loves excelling. He just can't get it out of his head, the notion of God's love for us, that generous love coming into our lives. And how do we react? We must react with the same generosity of who and what we are. And who and what we are, yes, does involve the money that passes into our hands. We need to be generous with that, as we are with ourselves, as we are with the people that God has made us. So, watchmen, messengers, and stewards. You can't all become butlers, I'm sorry. The number of butlers seems to be reducing somewhat in England nowadays. But you can all be stewards. You can be stewards of who and what you are, and stewards within the congregations where you are. So today, hold that generosity in your hearts and in your minds. See where it's leading you. See where the notion of generosity can take you. And then celebrate that, because that is also part of today, the celebration of the church that we are. I look down and see so many congregations gathered here in front of me, so many of you representing little bits of the church in Suffolk, and there is something to celebrate. Those of you who are sad enough to read the Church Times will have spotted that our attendance numbers are slowly creeping up by 1 or 2%. And that's amazing. But we need to gossip that. The old Bishop of London, the former Bishop of London, not the old one, the former Bishop of London, used to talk about gossiping the gospel. And we all used to sort of make noises behind his head when he was doing it. But it's a good concept. We need to talk about it. We need to talk about our successes as well as our failures. And one of our successes is bit by bit by bit, people are returning to church and returning to worship, showing God's generosity there. So much to celebrate, but also much to learn. So thank you all for being here, but also thank those who have put today together.